Hi, welcome to this week's Mailbox, where we've got topics such as Azerite armor, guests on shows looking for raid, quite a bit on master loot versus personal loot, world PvP in BFA, we've got another dictionary corner, and we've got, just for the hell of it, a science corner today as well. So without further ado, let's get on to the first one. So this system is getting personally panned, or generally panned, sorry. This is about Azerite armor, the new stuff that's just been in the alpha now. And I can see why. I must say I'm not a fan so far, not looking good at all. I would add that for a new expansion, the whole Azerite armor business seems poorly thought out. What I would say to this one, it may not be, the system itself may not be poorly thought out. What potentially is poorly thought out, in fact I don't think there's much potentially about it, is the way it's being presented. Alpha serves two purposes. One is obviously testing. I think Blizzard expansions, Blizzard games in general, are actually really good. When you compare them to launchers in other games that I've played, whether it be expansions or the games themselves, you know, the World of Warcraft does seem to be much better polished. A lot fewer things go wrong, all the rest of it. And I think part of that is testament to the testing that goes on. In fact, I remember when they were talking about, you know, when it wasn't the developers' ideas, but they were sort of told, you know, you need to be bringing out an expansion every year. I just didn't see that working. And that's because, you know, to get the same amount of testing that World of Warcraft does get for an expansion, it'd be like you'd have to be releasing one expansion, then a couple of months later, opening up the alpha to the next expansion. No. So I'm glad that was bin. But yeah, but the other side of it is hype. And that is, of course, why, I mean, who are the first people to get into when it goes open, when the alpha comes online? The first people to get in are, okay, you do get some very senior theory crafters in there as well. But ultimately, the people you get into, the big streamers, YouTubers, the people who are going to promote this expansion just by playing it, streaming it, doing videos on it. All right. We've had people in top guilds, cutting edge guilds all the way down, who until recently have just not been getting in at all. They've now started to do that. For weeks they weren't getting in. The people who would actually do a lot of the testing and feedback were simply not getting in. And that's testament to the importance of hype and promotion in this. So the promotion of Azerite armor has been poorly thought out. I would definitely agree with that. It might be that the whole system's going to work fine eventually. It might well be that what we've got so far is very much placeholder. I think at least one row is, because remember, last week there was an extra row in there that's not there now. But they're not selling it at the moment, are they? They're not selling it at all. I mean, the good side of that for me would be if it ends up being not a great system, then hooray, I don't have to farm loads of Azerite potentially. That's my big worry. How much Azerite am I going to be farming? Is it going to have to be as gung-ho as it was with Artifact Power? I'm hoping not. But I would certainly say that the marketing of it has not been at all well thought out. On to the next one, which is also Azerite armor related. So it says, I will not miss sets, so tier sets here, made gearing up for me even more complicated than reforging and gemming back in the day. However, I find this new system totally boring and unimpressive. In terms of complicated, if anything, the Azerite armor system, in theory, would make it more complicated. If it were more interesting than it appears at the moment, because with your tier sets, I mean, what have you got? You've got tier sets. Well, where tier sets? The only discussion before Legion to be made was which pieces do you wear. I suppose there was also a decision between, you know, going from one tier to the next. At what point do you abandon your previous 4 set? At what point do you abandon your previous tier set to go full on, you know, 4 set for the next one? In Legion, there's been a point at which you could have a 6 set potentially, depending on which were your best legendaries for your class and so on. I mean, I am still at the moment. I'm on a knife edge at the moment. I'm sort of, Sims technically tell me that I'm still supposed to wear my 2 set from the last tier. This far in, that's how mad it is. But it's sort of very, very close now with full on, you know, just 4 set plus legendaries in the new tier. So yeah, but with Azerite pieces, there are more of them. and you could end up in a situation realistically, even for Mythic Raiders, in a situation where there's multiple and maybe there's a decision to be made, and ultimately who's going to make that decision? Well, a sim, if you want to min-max it. For heroic or normal raiders, it could get even more complicated, because you'd also be talking about Mythic Plus ones being on par with the item level. Of course, Blizzard have said that the raid traits will be more impressive, but until we see them, well, we can't judge for ourselves on that one. I don't think the complexity is going to. I don't think Azerite armor is going to be in any way simpler, unless it is a dull as Ditchwater system. Because what we've got at the moment is your top row, you choose between a generic ability and something that affects a spell for your spec. Blizzard have tried to emphasize the fact that some of these spells are usable across the class, but so far from what we've seen, very, very few of them are cross-class. And so it's very likely you've got a choice of 2 on that top row. On the next row, well, they removed what was the next row, I suppose, but it used to be there was 1 choice for each role that your class has. So for a pure DPS class with 3 DPS specs, well, that'd be a choice of 3 DPS ones. Well, okay, technically there's a choice there, or at least something to sim, depends on how you want to approach it. If you're a paladin like me, then there'd be 1 tanking one, 1 healing one, 1 DPS one. So again, no choice there, unless that changes. Remember, they have moved it out. Maybe they've moved it out to change that, or maybe they've moved it out because, I mean, one idea I had, so last week they put in a single Azerite piece, just the chest piece, starting chest piece. Of course, you do get a choice of what you start with, but, starting piece, and that was it. And a lot of people complain, well, that's only 1 piece, what can we tell from that? So then they've just basically put everything in now. So all the Azerite pieces I have on my characters from questing and from dungeons now have the traits in them. But maybe they didn't expect to throw it out as early as they did, and they thought, well, it's not really ready. So what they've done is removed that row, which is the least ready. So maybe that is undergoing some changes there. But as it was then, there was no real choice there. So you've got a choice of 2 at the top. You've got a choice of none at all, unless you're a pure DPS class. Or a priest for healing, because they got 2 healing specs. They had 2 healing options there. But generally speaking, you're talking about classes that have got at least 2 DPS specs that would have any sort of choice. Onto the next row, they seem to be traits that exclusively give you a healing or movement speed boost. A lot of them are based on when you kill something, so not that useful in a raid. But then, to be fair, it's not raid traits we're looking at. It's stuff you're getting from quests and dungeons, so maybe it makes more sense to give you a bonus when something dies. But not all of them are when something dies. Some of them are like rolling buffs. And all right, there's a choice there, but at the same time, it's nothing that's affecting throughput. So it could be argued then it's one of those situations where a lot of people just won't care. And then the last one is like for item level. Well, that's one you want to get, but again, no choice there. So choice seems limited. So the main choice is going to be which Azerite pieces you go for, which have the combination of traits you really want. So on to the next bit. So it says, why can't they just give us our artifact weapons, give them a bunch of new appearances, add some more trees to spend points in and be done with it? I mean, that's something, certainly at the start of Legion is what I'd hoped they'd, well, actually no, at the start of Legion they'd already announced that they would be gone. At the point at which they hadn't definitely said that artifacts would be Legion only, that is what I was hoping for. I was thinking, you know what, as a new system in the game, this idea of an artifact weapon suits me. I thought it's quite good. I understand, of course, it wouldn't suit some other people. For example, you know, if you're a fire mage, you may not like the idea of just having this sword. You might like a staff. So I could certainly see that it wasn't very customizable. But if they'd have come up with a more customizable, from a cosmetic point of view, system of artifact weapons. I mean, it's straightforward as a paladin, of course, because you can only use 2-handers. Realistically, that's all you're going to be able to do damage with anyway. But for the classes that had more of a choice, yeah, they maybe should have given more of a choice with the weapon they had. But yeah, they did. It was just something purely for Legion for whatever reason. I can't even think about what discussions took place at the point where they decided to do it and then decided to only do it for one expansion. They must have had the discussion of, well, people are going to get, especially any system they put in a new expansion, they must think is a good system. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. It takes a lot of effort on their part. So if they're putting into something that they think is going to be a great system and people are going to love it, surely there must have been a conversation of, but if they love it that much, what are they going to think when they have to lose it? But I don't know. I don't know what they discussed about that. But yeah, I mean, that's something I sort of want them to do, but I, long since sort of got used to the idea that wasn't going to happen. So it seems so weird that we found the unique weapon stated to upgrade our characters to their utmost massive strong weapons, and now they've been replaced by some random green stuff, very anticlimactic. It's always been the case. That's been the case since... It's the reason, for example, that I didn't get far enough in the original Nax, because my guild, when we were just about to kill Gothic the Harvester, 2 months before TBC came out, just stopped raiding. Because everyone went, there's no point. Because they were all loot whores, basically. And from their point of view, what is the point of killing ourselves to kill these last few bosses just to get gear that we're going to replace with questing greens? Now, in actual fact, you didn't replace Nax gear that quickly, but still, you would have replaced it by the time you got to level cap. And it's the same in every expansion, isn't it? We do replace our shiniest epics with quest greens or blues, at least. If you've got the very best gear, then okay, it's more towards level cap that you'll be replacing it, not straight away. But that is just the nature of expansions in World of Warcraft. I'm not in favour of the idea of new expansions giving more levels. I would rather they didn't do that. I think we've got too many levels apart from anything else. And I don't think it's essential. Again, I looked at other MMOs. Not all MMOs give you access to extra levels when you want to have a new expansion. It's not necessarily something people want. They want new content. They might want some new systems in there. They don't all... Like, Blizzard do two things with World of Warcraft expansions, which I wish they wouldn't. One... But then, to be fair, a lot of people now look forward to them. So maybe, I'm in the minority on this one. One is levels. I don't see that as an advantage. And two is shaking up the classes. I mean, people look forward to, what are the new abilities? What are the new talents we're going to be getting? And I just think, no, just make the classes and specs work. And once it works, leave it. And then, if systems progress at some point in the future to the point where that spec is no longer perfect or not good enough, all right, then revisit it for the, to make it better, not for the sake of it, not because, it's a new expansion, they expect us to do something that makes it different. I mean, I don't want that. But anyway, there we go. That's my take on that one. But yeah, the Azerite system, if it became interesting, as it still potentially could, because we still don't know exactly what they've got planned for it. Because again, they haven't posted about it. I mean, what I would do is, and I don't understand why Blizzard don't do this, especially as in the last few years they've been getting better at communication. But there's still some really basic errors they make. Why aren't they providing some meaningful feedback from themselves in terms of what their aims are with these things? Instead of just showing us these pieces of Azerite. I mean, it must be annoying them that, this thing that some people have slogged their guts out, we're tearing it down. We're saying it's shit. Well, that's because it's presented poorly. And then from their point of view, they're probably thinking, well, they can't see yet the full... They'll like it when they see the full thing. Well... Okay, you might not be able to show us the full thing, but at least tell us what you're going to do with it. And they haven't done that. When they talk about it at BlizzCon or in these Q&As, it's all very vague. Everything they say is super vague. So for every major new thing or change you're going to put in an expansion, just get someone to write a short essay on what the aims of it are. It only has to be like 500 words or something. You could probably make it, or 1,000 words. It don't have to be massive. But just post the bloody thing. And then people can see what you're trying to do. So show an example of some leveling gear as it's intended to be at the end of it. Some, dungeon gear, raid gear, and that sort of stuff. Just show an example. We understand it's not all done yet. Just show an example with some explanations of what you're trying to do with it. All subject, with a warning at the bottom, subject to change based on feedback and based on, other development issues. But they don't. They don't. We are the big bad community. We must not be talked to unless it can not be avoided. Next one. So, to do with guests now. Really liked it when you had Soul Sacra on. This was for the live rec Q&A. Maybe you could get more guests on your Azeroth review, video streams, blah, blah, blah. Just to talk things. Maybe there's a new rating on the way. You could get someone to talk about that or more theory crafts, etc. I don't think it'd be good for the Azeroth review. The whole point of the Azeroth review is for people, the viewers, to talk about things. So I don't think that's a good idea. In general, the idea of getting someone on to talk about other things. I mean, one thing, you know, that might be quite nice at some point, or I had thought at one time, maybe not so much, I don't know, was actually doing this mailbox live with someone else who can maybe comment. We can have two people commenting on the same thing. All that sort of stuff would be brilliant. However, I don't fancy doing that just for the sake of it. I don't want to just go out and try and find people to get on unless there's a real reason to do so. So I did a chat with Soul So Breezy, for example, last week. You know, that was fun, and that was worth doing. Getting Soul Sacra on, of course, and Fardian before that on the live rec Q&As, that was worth doing. It made sense to do it. The idea of just chasing after people to come on, which is not easy, by the way. I have asked multiple people to do various things with where I've had a purpose for it, and, you know, until very recently, basically, no one had said yes. So I do occasionally try these things, but I'm not trying to just get people who are big on YouTube or Twitch or something like that, because if I can't see anything sensible to do, then I would rather not do it. But I had thought about something like that and maybe doing the mailbox more live. But again, you know, you'd need a steady stream of people to be able to do it, even if it wasn't every week, at least every month. And that doesn't seem to be happening. But yeah, I'm not gonna. I don't think it'd be appropriate for the Azeroth review, because I think that should be about viewers bringing things up that they want to talk about. If you have someone else on as well as me, then you end up talking for ages about one thing, and it's a bit rubbish. Oh, go away. Next one. So LFR, some LFR ones. Looking for raid. Did a little video. Personally, I find it strange that people keep trying to fix other people's content. If you're a Mythic Raider, do your thing and enjoy, but don't try to fix the LFR guys thing. A couple of things. First of all, it's not trying to fix anything. It's not my job to fix anything. That's the games developers. And also, you'll note, this isn't one of those things where I've posted something on the official forums in the hopes that the developers will even see it. It's just an idea. I occasionally post ideas. The whole point of ideas is not to say, right, this is the way I think it should be done. If it's the way I think it should be done, I will say so. These are just ideas just to get people's views on it. But in terms of the attitude of, you know, you're a Mythic Raider, you do your Mythic Raids, and LFR do that. Everything is connected. Everything's connected to everything else. LFR is part of my content too. World PvP is part of my content, and I don't like doing it. But it affects me, affects my gameplay. Everything in the game, including pet battles, affects my game as well. Everyone is involved. People who've never been into a Mythic Raid in their lives are affected by what Blizzard do with Mythic Raids. It's in the nature of the whole thing. You know, everything, every part of content, whether you do that content or not, affects the content that you do. You know, and I mean, I remember, for example, in vanilla, and now on my server, Azure Nerub EU at the time, there was, because a lot of people fundamentally loot whores, and especially in WoW, it's a very loot-driven game. All the customization is, I mean, okay, you could argue a little bit different these. So even then it's loot, isn't it? I was going to say because of the artifact power system in Legion and the Azerite system is sort of another system, but actually it's not, because what you're doing empowering gear anyway. So it's still very loot driven, the way you customize and advance your character. Potentially more so now, because you don't get any even new talents after level 100. So, you know, it's all about the loot then. You don't even have that as a slight aside. So in vanilla, summer 2005, I remember there was a rogue called Cheeky, Night Elf rogue, on my server, and he got Grand Marshal rank, and he was the first, I think, to do it. And there he was in Ironforge, parading with all his gear, all his shiny stuff, and on his black ram, you know, all the trappings of someone successful in PvP at the time. And everyone was like, ooh. And people saw PvP as a route to get really good gear, because people looked at raiding and PvP. Now, at the time on my server, again, there's a few guilds that did Molten Core, but there were also people who tried to pug it. And it became very clear to people, okay, you do this run. There's 40 people in this run. You get to the first boss somehow, because that was not an easy thing, especially for a pug. And you kill the first boss. Miracle. The first boss drops 2 pieces of loot. There's 40 people there. This was even worse odds than when you raided a dungeon. Dungeon bosses sometimes dropped more than 2 pieces of loot. So people became disenfranchised with this, but with the PvP, because the way they saw it is, you get hardly any gear dropping raids, but it's shared among so many people. So to get one person geared up would take forever. Whereas in PvP, it was seen that you all share the rewards, because you're all, if you form a team, a raid team, you join a proper raid guild, and you're all in there, you're all benefiting each other. You're all, getting the same thing. Several months later, you roll forward to, say, November, December time, and a lot of those same people were becoming a bit disenchanted with the whole thing. By then, I'd got into a raiding guild, and I think what people saw is actually the reality of the situation turned that initial impression on their head, because they saw these PvP players. Yes, a small number of them ended up with that epic PvP gear. A small number of them. Whereas when you looked at people who were raiders in raiding guilds, they all had epics. All of them. And they looked at it and thought, actually, raiding's the best way to get loot in this game, if you want those sweet epics. And again, it's just that, the content that you're not doing affects what you do, because it determines the content for a lot of those people that they did. And it's the same with LFR and normal mode and heroic mode and mythic raiding. A lot of people aren't necessarily drawn to... Obviously, if they didn't like the game, they wouldn't be doing any of the content. But if they'll be not always drawn to the content because of the content. Now, for me, the main reason I spend so much time on World of Warcraft is because what I actually like is the raiding. That's it. If the raiding went to hell, let's say they removed... Let's turn it on its head, forget about LFR issues. If they removed mythic raiding, they said, you know what, we're just going to remove it. We'll make heroic raiding maybe a little bit harder, but keep the flex thing and then just leave it at that. I would not stop playing World of Warcraft, but I would massively tune it down, and I'd start playing the other ones more often. And I'd split my time probably fairly evenly between that and other games, because it would last me a week or two. I'd be in a guild and we'd finish it all in a couple of weeks. And then that'd be that. We'd be doing what I'm doing now. Bloody long time it took, but we sort of finally cleared the raid, Taurus raid. So I've now got time to do some other things as well, because 2 fewer raid days in the week. But that would be for almost all the time. So, yeah. So what happens in the other things does affect other people, because, they're motivated. A lot of people aren't like me. They wouldn't do mythic raiding were it not for the better rewards, the achievements, the gear, whatever it happens to be that motivates some people. Not all, but some people. And some people are motivated by that. Some of the people, for example, who are in heroic guilds, who take a certain amount of time to finish heroic, want to do mythic. Some of them want to do it because it is more challenging. They want to do the more challenging content. Some of them will do it because, for achievements, or just the kudos of being a mythic raider. Some of them will do it just for the gear. And it's... people have different reasons for doing the content, but the content that's available determines, for some people, which content they'll do and what the rewards are from it. So how LFR is affects mythic raiders, and how mythic raiding is affects LFR raiders, even if you don't do that content, or whether you do it or not. So anyway, next one says, Preach does the same thing. Well, anyone interested in the game will do the same thing. Anyone interested in raiding will do the same thing, but we're not trying to fix it, because it's not up to us to fix it. It's up to developers. If there's a problem, to fix it. I'm not even saying there's a problem. You know. I have yet to see the LFR raid guy try to remove mythic because it is too hard. We haven't been looking very hard then, because there's been a lot of people calling for it. You know, it's quite a common theme on forums to basically remove mythic raiding. There's a lot of people like this. I mean, this all came from the 10 versus 25 man raiding situation that we had a few years ago. And people say, you know, when they sort of stopped it and said mythic 20 only, and people go, oh, they should still make it flex because I want to do it in small groups because, you know, it's more cozy, which is a load of horseshit. People wanted to do it because it was easier. You know, it's easier to get a smaller group together than it is a bigger group. But, which now, hopefully, you know, Dungeons allows you to do that. If you genuinely want a small group to do challenging content, there's Mythic Plus now. But, so, yeah, so people have absolutely called for what Mythic is to be removed. You know, they just want... Because if you made Mythic, what Mythic is now, flex, all it is heroic. Because you can't actually have meaningful mechanics in a flexible raid size, because you make it... You still have an optimal number of people to do it, for people who want to min-max it. But the game, your Blizzard would have to design it so that you could do it with anything from 10 to 30 people, which means the people who take the optimal number of people will beat the content much more easily, and that's what you would do. There'd be no content in it. It would be like finished in a couple of weeks, the whole thing. Even by, like, you know, much, I mean, the whole thing is finished by that, by the top guilds anyway, but I mean, far from top guilds. Hundreds of ranks down would be doing that. And that happens all the time. Says also the argument that LFR takes away from normal raiding is kind of thin. I've done the whole mythic 5-night-a-week grind and then down to heroic 2 nights after having a child. Now I'm lucky to get an LFR and plus 15 in. Taking away all nutrient LFR wouldn't make me jump to normal. I'd probably just stop playing altogether. Sure, I mean, I'm not one of the ones who says to remove LFR. However, that being said, you are someone who says you wouldn't do normal. The real reason that you wouldn't have... It's not because you haven't got time because you've got a child. The real reason is because you do other things as well. That's obvious, because there are people with children who don't neglect them, who manage to do other things as well. Because, you know, you still have hobbies. You have to scale back, of course, when you have a child, but you don't cut everything out. So you would still be able to do it. It's just that there's obviously other things you like to do as well. And World of Warcraft is lower down that priority system, which is fine. And absolutely, if there were no LFR, there would be quite a number of people who would stop playing or stop raiding or stop even trying. They wouldn't jump into normal. I know that. That's why I don't call for LFR to be removed. But at the same time, there's an awful lot of people who would do normal, but they do LFR because it is actually a hassle to get into normal. But I think I'll come on to that. I think there's another question where I could come on to that as well. Is this the one? Ah, this is the one. So, I was talking, oh God, now I've got to try and remember this, because this was partway through a conversation, really. So someone was saying something about people couldn't get into normal mode because they didn't have tier sets, which I said, well, no one has tier until they've done a raid that drops it anyway. So they tried to clarify it by saying they had tier sets from Blackrock Foundry going into Hellfire Citadel, the LFR tier sets. Because this is about WoD I was talking about. Yeah, that's it. I was talking about a system where LFR has its own loot table again, different to normal heroic. And they did this in WoD. And they were trying to argue that it didn't work in WoD. And I've never seen any evidence for it. But okay, we'll look at the comments. The LFR tier sets from LFR in both Hellfire and Blackrock Foundry were considerably worse than normal in the book. Yes. This doesn't encourage players at all. It led to people being kicked in pugs before they can even get a first bit of tier because Tanan juggled gear didn't cut it. Now. Well, this I don't think is true. I don't know what basis this is based on. If it's based on the fact that you were such a person or knew such a person that was in LFR gear and couldn't get into a normal, it is worth bearing in mind that I was a mythic raider who couldn't get into normal. You know, I've said this on more than one occasion in the past. Hellfire Citadel, I had to go on holiday for a week during it. And it was while my guild was on Gorefiend. And so I already had some mythic pieces. I already had some mythic bosses under my belt. Obviously, I'd already done normal and heroic as well, so I had all the achievements from that. And I came back, and the guild had already done their run, and you needed it for something. There was a couple of things you would want. Oh yeah, it was just yeah, that's right. I'd got my legendary ring. It was just about killing Archimond so that I could get the thing to upgrade my legendary ring. And I tried getting into a normal, just a normal, because I only need it on normal. Mythic Raider. Didn't get in. So some people will just turn you down regardless. And I know it's natural to think that if you're being turned down because, you know, and you look at your gear and you think, well, they're turning down because I'm just in LFR gear. It's not necessarily true. They turned me down in mythic gear. Because they just looked at me and thought, oh, Paladin. And it was not more. It was not just one thing as well. I spent a good hour, as much time as I could spend, about an hour and a half, trying to approach different groups. You know, I had a similar thing in Antorus as well, hilariously, because I missed one raid, the first raid where we were doing heroic, and missed a load of bosses. So I did the last 4 bosses. So you know the joke about, you know, to get into a pug, you need to get your ahead of the curve achievement before it's even possible, like before. Well, I sort of had that. You know, I was trying to join, and the first week that normal and heroic were out, a heroic pug, and I was able to link them the ahead of the curve because I'd killed the last few bosses, and I just wanted to do, you know, a fuller run to coin a few bosses, or at least to try and get some loot of personal loot. Couldn't get in then either. You know, now it's not to say that if I kept trying, I wouldn't get in. But then it's the same thing there. If you're, and I can understand the thinking, you know, if you're in a character and you're in LFR, maybe in the back of your mind you're already thinking, you know, I might be lucky to even get into a normal. Then you're also, you know, if you get knocked back a few times. I mean, I got knocked back a few times as a mythic raid and I thought, what the hell are these fools doing? I'll be their top DPS, what the hell? But, you know, if you're in that LFR gear, it's natural to think, well, they're just turning me down repeatedly because I'm in LFR gear. They're not turning you down repeatedly because you're in LFR gear. They're turning you down repeatedly because they don't know what they're doing. And maybe it's that as well. And then the other thing to note here, so what you're saying is that they're in LFR gear from Blackrock Foundry wanting to go into normal Hellfire Citadel. Well, why not go into normal Blackrock Foundry and get some tier from there? So again, that's not an argument for LFR not awarding the same gear, because you can just go, all right, I'm not being accepted into normal Hellfire Citadel because I haven't got, you know, that the normal Blackrock Foundry gear. Well, where do you get normal Blackrock Foundry gear? You get it in normal Blackrock Foundry, and the people going into normal Blackrock Foundry, they're not going to have a full set of the best items that normal Blackrock Foundry will give. Otherwise, they wouldn't be pugging it. So no, the thinking there doesn't bear fruit at all. And you say it led to people getting kicked in pugs. I mean, that's another interesting point. So they got in to get kicked from a pug. You have to get into the pug, don't you? I mean, again, are we sure if they got kicked from a pug, it had nothing to do with their gear? If it was to do with their gear, they would never have got in the first place. So it was something else that they did on the fight or didn't do on the fight. So again, and again, I'm just thinking, you know, think about someone who's only got LFR stuff from Blackrock Foundry. They haven't got any normal heroic gear from Blackrock Foundry. And they're going into Hellfire Citadel normal. It's just possible that they weren't dealing with the mechanics, because you can go through LFR and not have to deal with any mechanics unless you're like a tank or something. Very few people have to deal with mechanics. All of a sudden you go into normal, there's mechanics to do with, and the person isn't doing it. Again, the reason you're getting kicked then is not because of gear. It's because you're not doing the fight properly. And again, it might be that the raid leader has pointed the accusing finger after a wipe at the wrong person. Sure, okay. But nonetheless, it's got nothing to do with gear. Gear stops. If it's gear, you don't get in the first place. So there we go. That's that one. Blimey, that took a while. Next one, number 7. This is an LFR one. So this is now the counter view. Says, personally, I think that they should remove LFR. It would stop people from being carried If they want to see the content, they would actually learn the fights and be prepared to raid. Now, this isn't actually quite true. This is the sort of thinking you put on someone who is motivated to do a thing. You know, this is like the sort of thinking I might apply to my students who try and use a crutch, such as using calculators to do simple calculations, things like that. But in this particular case, it wouldn't necessarily stop people. The sort of people who want to be carried are not just going to buckle down, learn the fights, prepare to raid. They'll go and play another game. Or they'll do more basic content in that game. And then if that's not enough to be worth their subscription, they'll stop playing. You know, so that will never work because the reward isn't. If the reward was strong enough, they would move from LFR to normal anyway. Like there are some people, like I just said in that previous comment, who would want to raid, and if LFR weren't a thing, they would do normal. But there's an awful lot that won't. I mean, Blizzard aren't daft. Having LFR, normal, heroic, and mythic creates a lot of problems. It creates problems for them because you've got 4 tiers of content that have got to have significantly different difficulty levels and different levels of gear reward to go with it as well, which is not an easy thing to manage, especially when you have other sources of gear in the game as well. It is absolutely not a straightforward thing to manage. So, you know, if LFR weren't, or they didn't believe it were bringing in a lot of players into the game or retaining those players in the game, they wouldn't be doing it. Apart from anything else, you can sort of tell that they strongly believe, and they would have data to back this up. Whether I trust them to be able to analyse the data properly is another matter. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Because, you know, I have the attitude that they don't really seem to do market research very well at all. But they do have the data on people who exclusively play LFR as opposed to doing other forms of raid, and their subscription patterns. Because you notice with LFR, they don't do what they do with normal, heroic, and mythic and sort of bring it out. It's like, you know, 1 week normal heroic come out, the following week mythic comes out. With LFR, they stagger it. It takes a good couple of months to get all the wings out. And the reason they do that is because they know otherwise a lot of those players will just play through all the wings of the LFR. You know, they'll get a month's subscription to play that, and then they'll stop. And they'll wait 4 or 5 months for the next one to come out and then subscribe for that one. So by staggering it out, and again, they'll have the data on this, they obviously are of the opinion that it's getting those same people to subscribe for 2 months as opposed to 1 month. Otherwise, they wouldn't be staggering it out. And as I say, they wouldn't be doing LFR at all if they didn't believe that it was getting them a lot of people to pay those subscriptions. And the next one. Oh, we're on to loot now. Master loot and personal loot. So I think one thing that Blizzard has not stated, but I think had an impact on the decision to remove Master Loot, is it will completely destroy the real money carries, as they won't be able to funnel gear in the same way and also won't be able to sell things like the Gul'dan mount or Shackled Urzel. I'm not sure how it would affect mounts as such, because someone will still get a mount and it may be tradable. So I don't know about for the mounts. However, in terms of gear, yes. There is... I wouldn't say it's impossible. Because again, remember, by the time a guild is able to boost people through for money, they're likely to have gear that's good enough. That means even though they get stuff as personal loot, they would be able to pass it on. In fact, it could actually help. Because let's say you're taking through, just for the sake of argument, a warrior. Okay. So what you could do is try and arrange for a group to boost them through that contains a lot of plate wearers. You know, DPS paladins, death knights, warriors. So you'll generate more plate loots, you'll generate more two-handed weapons, if that's what they're into. You know, the sort and strength trinkets, all that sort of thing. You'll generate more of them, so you're actually giving the booster a better deal and potentially could charge more money as a result of it, or more gold. So it could actually make it better from that point of view. However, the other point I would say about this is it's really not any concern of Blizzard. You know, although Blizzard have no issue with you know, selling boost for gold. They are obviously absolutely opposed to, as you say there, the real money carries. But, and I can see where you're thinking on this. You're thinking, okay, well, they're dead against the real money carries. Are they just using this as a way to try and kill that market off? Because they haven't as yet given a satisfactory reason why you shouldn't be able to have master loot, at least in a guild on mythic mode. You know, if you just left it on guild mythic modes, that would solve all the actual problems they've identified. But as I said, I think the system has the potential to benefit. And I say potential because it is an odd thing that at the moment, you know, you have guilds obviously boosting these people, and they don't do that. Because there's the option to do it right now. In fact, personal loot gives you more loot as opposed to master loot. So, you know, I sometimes wonder why a guild that's in the position to be able to do that doesn't do more of that. Or if they're boosting 3, let's say they pick for the purpose of tier, which of course won't make any difference in BFA, you know, a Vanquisher, a Prot user and a Conqueror user, why they don't at least just try and emphasize have them use 3 different types of armor and exclude the type of armor that isn't involved in those boosties. So if one of the boosties, for example, is a hunter, another one is a death knight, another one is a priest, then maybe you don't have any leather users in the raid if you can avoid it, and boost them through just with plate, mail, and clothes, which of course would be possible if you've got a large enough selection of suitable characters to do that. You know, and then you stack the odds in your favour, because you will then, in that, if you could do it to that extent, and potentially top guilds could, you would have 0 leather gear dropping, none at all on personal loot. But of course, you know, from the tier point of view, maybe that's why they don't do it, because you wouldn't get tier tokens either. You'd get the tier for those classes, which of course scuppers it all up. So maybe with the lack of tier, and it's going to be Azerite, you know, that consideration is removed. And yeah, you know, I can see this helping people who want to boost people through raids. I can see it be made easier just because of the lack of tier. And as I say, personal loot is potentially a better way to do it anyway. Just get people to trade it over. They're very likely to have a higher item level, or at least equal item level to what drops, unless some stunning piece of Titan Forge drops. And then you just have to say in your conditions, look, if a really high item level thing Titan Forges, you're not going to get it. But you could easily state that anyway now, because it's better on your own raiders. So that's what I would say on that one. And I have really no idea how the mounts work anyway. Don't know how the mounts work. Next one. Is it this one? So, again, Master Loot and Personal Loot. So I'm in a guild where we often discuss if we use Master Loot or Personal Loot. Always good to discuss, because there are, as I say, Blizzard have tried to encourage the use of Personal Loot, even when Master Loot could be used. That's why it awards more loot. I hate to use Master Loot because we don't give the items to people that most need it. Last week, a very high item level trinket goes to a Shadow Priest that is most of the time not even in the raid. And this is why, you know, I get comment after comment after comment of people saying that, you know, they're a mythic raider. Well, I say I've commented, actually it's not that many comments, but it's enough for me to notice. A mythic raider who supports personal loot. There is only one reason as a mythic raider to support personal loot, and that is this, where the master loot system is not handled well. And this, by the way, that specific example, in a situation where you give an item to the wrong person, because some people have talked about, you know, using master loot to reward, you know, give it to the person on highest attendance or something like that. That's not a good system either. You know, when it comes to attendance, you should just expect a certain amount of attendance. You just have it in your thing. You shouldn't punish people for having, you know, as long as they've got, if they meet your attendance requirements, you shouldn't punish them for having significantly less than other people, as long as they're making what you say. If you want more attendance out of people, then set the bar higher. But anyway, so yeah, but in this particular case, so you gave a high item level trinket to a Shadow Priest. The Shadow Priest is irrelevant, but it says that most of the time is not even in the raid. That's you know, that's not even ignorance, because no master looter would do that. That is just giving it to their friend or someone like that. Because no one would be that stupid. Certainly not in a mythic raid. Because, you know, that's absolute madness. You don't give... the whole idea of master loot is to try and reduce the number of bits of gear that end up logged out or on the bench when you're progressing your next fight. It's all designed to get as much of that gear into the next progress challenge as possible. And that does the opposite. So, you know, but that I can see, you know, when the people are saying, oh, you know, I'd favour personal loot for that, I can see why they'll say that, because they think it will reduce the chance of that. But it actually won't. You know, it still happen, because that same Shadow Priest, if they were in that raid to get that item, they may have got that item anyway. Yeah, sure, someone else may have got it. But on balance, it'll just work out the same. So a guild that uses master loot and gives themselves no advantage from it, I don't think there's a scenario that I can realistically think of where it's worse than personal loot. It can be no better than personal loot. In which case, in the here and now, you might as well use personal loot, because you'll get more gear out of it. But in BFA, there won't be such a thing as master loot. So this concept of, well, you get more gear from personal loot will be a nonsense, because, well, no, you won't. You'll get the amount of loot that it gets, because it's the only way of looting. So there you go. So it says, if such things happen in personal loot, I can't do much about it, and that's fine if he gets it. That's not actually true. It says, but if our loot master gives it away, I'm not very happy about it. This is where, you know, there is going to be, I've talked about this before, haven't I? A bit of a social issue that could arise if guilds don't consider this. So, all right, let's say you're going into the next expansion, you're going to the next raid tier. Like at the moment, guilds, progress guilds, have a loot policy. Now, I wonder how many guilds will just not update their loot policy, because you've got to. You'll have to update the loot policy. But I think some guilds won't. I think there will just be some understandings about how it will work, but different people will have different understandings. So some people may view it as you've just done there. With personal loot, there's nothing you can really do about it. The game gives it to someone. That's not true. In the first week of a raid tier, it's very likely that whatever you get is yours, because it will be higher item level than what you've already got. But let's say, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, you might get 2 rings, and then even though you might want them both, well, you could still give one of them away. So let's say you get into a situation where for the first couple of weeks, the guild just leaves it as it is. If someone wants to trade it, they can do. But then, of course, that causes its own problems, because you get people whining at other people. Can you give it to me? I know you can trade it. Can you trade it to me, please? And the other person... But then after a few weeks, it'll get to the point where more of that loot is tradable. And will there then suddenly be a situation where the officers go, okay, we're now in a position to be able to assign more of the loot. It's now worth our time doing that. So don't equip your stuff. We're going to use this add-on to see who's got stuff that could be traded. And then we will assign it. Now, if people weren't expecting that, then there could be a bit of argy-bargy about that, and quite rightly too, because if you were of the opinion that you were just going to let the game assign it, and we'll just make the best of it, and if I get an item, it's my choice whether or not I sacrifice it or not to give it to someone else, entirely my decision and no one else's, and then you come to a situation where just out the blue, the officer said, no, we're going to assign it, just as if it were master loot, it's just going to take longer and be a bit more of an arsehole to do it, you know, that could cause trouble. That could cause trouble. But I mean, that's down to, I mean, I wouldn't blame that on Blizzard. That's down to the individual guilds not foreseeing how they need to update their policies based upon a seismic change in the way that the loot rules are going to be. So, fun and finished comment there. So in general, I'm happy for me that master loot is away, but I understand for guilds with really competent loot master, they don't like it to lose personal. Now, the thing is, though, I mean, there was another comment. I don't think I've got it here, but someone was saying about if so many people preferred personal loot, why not join a guild that used it. And there's some people saying, well, you know, there might not be one on your server. But that in itself is a suggestive, because why? Why do you not really hear about progress guilds that use personal loot if there were so many people in favour of it? Because it could be quite a good selling point. You know, if guild leaders, especially ones struggling to recruit, if they seriously thought that using personal loot was a big selling point, I'd be surprised if some guilds didn't do that. Because Legion has been tough to recruit. And if it was, so I can only imagine that, you know, certainly the perception is that there just aren't enough people to be tempted by using personal loot. People view master loot as a sign of an organised guild, and don't trust a guild that wouldn't use it, especially for progress. But anyway, I mean, it is going, so, you know, we're just going to have to get used to it. That's all there is to it. Now, this next one, I'm not sure whether this one would be true or not. But so now we're into the realms of people who will try and game the system, as people will try and game any system, of course, to get themselves the best loot. Including the system we have now. Even master loot can be gamed a little if the officers are not right on top of it. I remember in my last guild, for example, I've been in other guilds where we've done this as well. We've generally got people to, at the start of a tier, write down their BIS list. I know BIS lists haven't really mattered in Legion, but nonetheless, people write down their BIS list, and then that document, which they can edit up till the raid goes out, and then it's locked. And it's a bit like saying, okay, if this belt drops and you say it's your BIS, then, you know, you will be on high priority to get it. But if another belt drops that just happens to be a massive upgrade for you, you will be on lower priority to get it, unless, of course, no one else thought it was BIS. That sort of thing. Just to stop people saying that everything's BIS. But anyway, worst part is you can just not loot the boss and just get stuff later in the mail. So I was talking about this as well at some point. Bypassing any kind of loot system. Granted, this is more of an issue for cesspool heroic guilds. Oh, no. No. If that system would work, there would be, I would hope not, I would hope there wouldn't be people in all mythic guilds that would do this. But there would be mythic raiders who would do this, and some of them quite high up mythic raiders. In fact, sometimes the more competitive they are, the more likely they are to do it. Unless someone is watching them like a hawk. But here's the thing, would it actually work? So the concept is you don't loot the boss. You know, no one can really tell, as far as I know, that you haven't looted the boss, because apart from anything else, you know, unless it drops a quest reward, then someone can know that you don't seem to have that quest item. So there'll be some bosses you'll have to loot to give you that quest item. You know, the one where you usually get a quest and then you do it 4 times, then you get to skip to that boss. And then the idea is you go and pick it up from the mailbox sometime later. Well, here's the thing. Maybe someone can answer this, because I don't know. Would it show up in the guild loot log if you got an item from your mailbox? Because if it did, you'd be found out. Okay? I mean, sure, you couldn't trade it at that point, but you can be kicked out of the guild. Or put on a loot ban yourself. Because, yeah, I'd be thinking that maybe it would show up on the loot log, because not only is there a loot log in the guild, in the actual guild interface in game, you know, it shows up on things like, you know, in your armory. So therefore it also shows up on Warcraft logs on your sheet. So, you know, in an atmosphere where it'd be possible people would try and nose on each other and catch them doing it, I have a hunch that it would be possible to catch it. And even if it were not, you know, someone inspecting each other suddenly finds that they're wearing, you know, a BIS trinket that they didn't have before, might be asking questions about where they got it from. Especially as it'll be flagged mythic. You know, they won't be able to say they got a good Titan Forge from Raid Finder, because it'll say mythic on it. So I don't think that system will work. Or I don't think it will work more than once, because I think there'll be people who will catch them. So this is the world PvP stuff. Okay. And says, I'm arguing against the sharded PvP of BFA because for me at least it removes choice from WoW. Well, the thing is, choice for who? Choice for who? What about my choice, for example, to be able to just go around my business doing some quests and not getting jumped? And then it says PvP will now be hidden away like WoW's dirty little secret and shard. It won't, because it will be full of people who also want to engage in that content. And that means that's better, because that means you're going to come across those players more often. So you're playing with the people who want to do the same type of thing as you, just jump each other. So it'll actually be better from that point of view. Remember, the way sharding works is it always makes sure, as far as possible, that there's a reasonable number of people in the area as well. Not too many, not too few. It says, I will no longer be able to see it going on around me and have the choice to join or not. It's a horrible... Yeah, but you do have a choice. If you don't want to engage in it, war mode off. If you do want to engage in it, war mode on. It's a horrible removal of emergent gameplay that I've loved since starting playing Villa. But again, the only... I ask why. The only person that can possibly be... I'm not... Right, if you're opposed to the new system because maybe the rewards are going to be too strong and it's going to make PvE players want to put war mode on, but still not engage, then I can understand you being opposed to it for that reason. But the opposing the idea of letting people choose whether they're PvE or PvP can only be opposed by someone who wants to force other players to do content for their entertainment. You know, you go into a game, you force NPCs to do things for your entertainment, not other players. Because that's selfish. That's just inherently selfish. So there is nothing wrong with this. The only people that can possibly have an argument against it, unless someone would like to refute that with a solid example of something else, would be people who like the idea of ganking. You know, ganking basically is getting the jump on someone who will not be able to fight back effectively, either because they are already on low health from fighting some mobs and you're jumping them, you know, and finishing them off, or they've just got much poorer gear than you, which is easily ascertainable. You just click on and find their stamina, you know, or you've just got a big group of mates and you just know you're going to flatten them. That sort of thing. Now, that's just not nice. So the fact is that this is going to allow you to be in a place where, yes, you could be creeping up on someone to get a jump on them, but you also know that they're up for it as well. And so might someone else be that you haven't spotted is sneaking up on you, which should be ideal. You know, at least, I mean, I say ideal, it's still a crap system for me. That's why I won't really want to engage in it. Unless, of course, the rewards are strong, in which case I will weigh up the pros and cons of it, try it out, and mix and match it. But in general, it's not really a form of gameplay I want to get involved in. I should have the choice not to get involved in it. I should have the choice to be able to do my quests in peace. Right? With the only people disturbing me being the NPCs. Anyway, so on to a couple of ones. So a dictionary corner this time. It's not a normal one, this one, though, because this was from someone a bit tongue-in-cheek. They know the real reason. But I thought I'd go over it anyway. Very fun one. So is it schedule or schedule on this one? So I obviously pronounce it schedule because I'm British. And of course, I understand that Americans pronounce it schedule. But just to point out the reason why, because people will go, oh, it's got a C in it. Well, it's also got a H on one side and an S on the other. And even Americans do pronounce SCH sh in almost all situations. For example, the composer Schubert. I've never heard an American call him Scoobert. Or what about Schultz, the cartoonist? I've never heard an American call him Skultz either. So it's just the way it's done in Europe. SCH is a sh sound, like from German. It's, you know, the S there that sort of softens the C. So, you know, that's just how it's pronounced. So I say schedule. Now, you will see British people say schedule as well, because a lot of British people watch too much American telly. But anyway, I know the person who said that sort of knew what their actual reason was. It was just a bit of fun. So then the next one. Now I've got a science corner. Now it's not a proper science corner, but I am a scientist, so I couldn't resist this one. Yeah, so there's this comment. It's really more of a science education thing. I was talking about the fact that, you know, I can get my students in, like this September, you know, second week in September, I will start again with new classes of students, and I will ask them my 3 questions just to basically see how many of them can think like a scientist. But one of them will be, you know, I'll lead them into it as well. I'm a proper arsehole about it. And I will say, you know, okay, you're all choosing to do science. You like science, do you? You get from, yeah. Have you enjoyed doing science at school? You spent 11 years in compulsory education. Have you always enjoyed science? You get from some, yeah. All right, great, good stuff. What is science? Sometimes people have been able to answer me. Most of the time they've not. So someone said here, it's a shame when students can't answer what is science by the time they're 10 years old. Well, I don't even get them at 10, I get them at 16. And can't coherently describe scientific methodology by the time they're 13. In the UK, they're just not taught it. I mean, unless they have a teacher that does. There's no requirement of the science teachers, unfortunately, to teach them these things. So if they get a teacher like me who finds it extremely important to do it. I mean, I have to say, at the level I now do it. But you're quite right. There's no reason why students much younger shouldn't actually be taught what science is. And it's one of these maddening things. There's a lot of people use a lot of terms, and often quite correctly. It's sort of like they've got an intuitive understanding, but they can't actually articulate it. But it is a shame. But unfortunately in the UK, our education system is largely a relatively cheap daycare centre. So if you have a teacher that's very, very passionate about science and really wants to do more than just get the best grades and follow the national curriculum and wants to actually, you know, teach you what it's really about, then great, you will have some who could do that. But there is no requirement. And oftentimes as well in some schools, there isn't even necessarily always the expertise either. I mean, some science teachers don't necessarily know, because, you know, scientists are a bit lacking, and to get science, you know, scientists, well qualified scientists, to accept pay and conditions in British schools, a lot of British schools, it's not going to work. But anyway, there we go. So that is the mailbox for this week. Thanks, Kim. All the statements coming. I'll keep trying to pick them out each week. If you've got any comments from today's, of course, throw it down below, and I'll hopefully be able to get those read at some point. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with other people who might also be interested in my rambling. And until next time, I'll see you later.